Last time, we looked at 3 bouts where fighters used ingenious plans to defeat living legends who seemed unbeatable at the time. These fighters used intelligent game plans to overcome the odds, countering what seemed at the time to be near invincible styles. This time, we'll look at 3 more fascinating bouts from boxing and kickboxing where fighters were able to overcome the odds. We'll be starting off this video looking back to 1936, when the iconic brown bomber Joe Louis fought the German ex-heavyweight champion Max Schmeling. At the time, Louis was undefeated, having knocked out 19 of his 23 opponents. He had a slow, methodical approach, inching forward and leaning back and inside in a slight crouch. This loaded up his terrifying right hand. He set up these atomic bombs by slipping jabs, which he tended to draw out with a jab of his own. It was a simple tactic, but the results spoke for themselves. Schmeling was an older ex-champion looking to climb back up the ranks, and at the time, no one gave him much of a chance. After all, Louis had knocked out his last 10 opponents. But Schmeling had done his homework on Louis's style, having actually traveled to America just to watch Louis fight. What's more, he felt he had caught a weakness in Louis's form. Schmeling had noticed that Louis pawed with his jab. This was usually a boon for Louis, as it let him knock his opponent's guard out of the way as he drew their jab. But Schmeling was determined not to let that happen. Instead, he planned to exploit the fact that Louis dropped his jab after throwing it. On the night of the fight, when Louis tried to draw a jab, Schmeling did jab back, but he kept his weight back and moved offline, well out of Louis's reach, leaving him no opportunity to counter with his devastating right. Schmeling was fine with presenting a weak jab to Louis. The punch he was looking to make a difference with was his own right. And he did just that in the 4th. Schmeling's plan worked perfectly. He caught Louis with the cross as he dropped his jab, exploiting the brief opening in his guard, and then followed up to knock the brown bomber to the canvas. Louis survived the round and went back to what he had always known. He found some success at close range, but Schmeling was able to escape quickly back to the center of the ring, keeping Louis away by stiff-arming his lead shoulder. And in the 12th, Schmeling again found a home for his right. And this time, Louis could not make the count. It's a telling reminder that in the fight game, only one small weakness can prove the downfall of an otherwise well-developed fighter. Ironically, rather than Schmeling, it was Louis who would go on to take the heavyweight championship, which led the brown bomber to declare that he would not consider himself the true champion until he had defeated Schmeling. The night of the fight, Louis did show an adjustment with his jab, but that honestly made little difference. The main adjustment that Louis made was to give up on his cautious, methodical nature and go right for the kill. Louis had given Schmeling trouble in their first bout each time he got into close range, but all the same, he'd seemed hesitant to make use of that distance. This time, Louis aggressively closed the distance immediately, bowled through Schmeling's attempt at a frame, and then began systematically tearing apart Schmeling's defenses. Having the confidence to charge in haphazardly is a solution you might see in a Rocky movie, but this one time, it worked. If you're a student of the game, I recommend rewinding and watching in slow motion how Louis sets up each punch with a frame, a pull, or a feint. Schmeling didn't make it past the first round, and Louis went on to an unprecedented string of victories, remaining the champ for years to come. Up next is Ernesto Hoost versus Manson Gibson. Back in the 90s, Ernesto Hoost was arguably the greatest kickboxer in the world. Hoost had powerful knees in the clinch and an insane chopping right roundhouse kick that felled many top competitors. Hoost could set up his roundhouse off of boxing combinations or from the clinch, and threw especially nasty kicks from close to mid-range, his insane hip mobility greatly aiding his power. Gibson's style was unorthodox and electric. He danced around the ring, switching stances and throwing wild spinning combinations. Although he landed some terrific knockouts, nearly every single thing about his style, from his short, bladed stance to his lunging side kicks, made him vulnerable to leg kicks. And he was about to fight the man who specialized in just obliterating his opponent's legs. But, as it would turn out, Gibson had some tricks up his sleeve. To negate Hoost's knees from the clinch, Gibson grabbed behind his legs like a wrestler and turned him, hooking his leg if he attempted an attack. When he couldn't get a grip in time, Gibson used a cross guard to protect himself, and then landed well-timed counters. But the truly impressive thing was the way that Gibson handled Hoost's leg kicks. A bladed stance leaves the back of your leg exposed and gives you far less time to turn your shin outside to check. But Gibson had the novel idea of going with Hoost's kick. He stepped inside to dispel the force, and then would follow up with a spinning back fist. As has been mentioned before, Gibson loved to spin. It was essentially the Dutch idea of trading a leg kick for a harder one while the opponent is still resetting. But instead of replying with another roundhouse, Gibson used a back fist. Gibson's footwork was also giving Hoost trouble. Gibson used lateral movement to switch stances and create deceptive angles. Hoost was left swinging at air several times, even trapping his own leg on the ropes. Still, it wasn't all smooth sailing for Gibson. His spin kick attempts were falling victim to Hoost's intercepting leg kicks. Yet another factor was Gibson's lead leg side kicks. Like Wonderboy Thompson does today, Gibson switched to southpaw to attack with lead leg side kicks and keep the distance. But while Gibson was often able to stop Hoost in his tracks, he was incredibly vulnerable once he completed the kick and set his weight down. Gibson tried to rechamber instead, but over time, Hoost realized that he could just attack Gibson's rear leg as he kicked. All the same, in the last round, Gibson countered one of Ernesto's hooks to land a superb spinning back fist, dropping him. Now that Hoost had tasted Gibson's spinning back fist, Gibson was able to use spinning as a feint the remainder of the round, following up with real attacks. And then, Gibson put Hoost on the ground one more time before the round ended, assuring his victory. Or not. The judges ruled it a draw, triggering one more round. Gibson started that round off with a bang. While side kicks are vulnerable to roundhouse counters, round kicks are vulnerable to intercepting side kicks. Gibson scored another knockdown, sending Hoost back to the canvas. Hoost got up, showing a fierce determination to win, and Gibson clinched, blocked, and danced for the remainder of the round. The round came to a close, and this time, the judges made their decision final, handing Gibson a split decision loss. So technically, it's cheating to put this one on the list, but I feel Gibson deserves some recognition for what many, if not most, would have judged a win over perhaps the greatest kickboxer of all time. The next bout we'll be taking a look at is the first fight between Ken Norton and Muhammad Ali. Ken Norton was a talented heavyweight with a great jab, good fundamentals, a cross-block defense, and a powerful punch. All the same, no one gave him much of a chance against Muhammad Ali, basically because it's Muhammad Ali. But for Norton, this was his one chance at a better life for himself and his child. While Ali didn't train seriously for Norton, Norton trained and prepared like a madman. And what's more, Norton's coach was the great Eddie Futch, the same man who had coached Frazier and devised the game plan that led to Ali's first and only defeat. Futch decided that the key to defeating Ali for Norton was to take away Ali's jab and establish his own. The night arrived, and within the first few rounds, it became apparent that Norton would be no bum of the month. Usually, Ali would jab and then use his incredible speed and head movement to evade any incoming counters. So, Futch told Norton to jab with Ali at the same time. When he jabbed, Ali brazenly flared his rear hand to aid his reach, counting on his incredible reflexes to keep him safe from counters. But this meant that for a brief instance, his jaw was wide open. What's more, Norton had found a tell. He noticed that Ali's pec twitched just as he started his jab, and he used this cue to time Ali. Once Norton had taken away the foundation of Ali's style, he began to build off of his own jab to counter, corner, and punish Ali. It's been said that he who controls the left controls the world, and Norton was proving it. But midway through the fight, Ali began to dance, using his footwork to cut angles and escape unharmed. To everyone watching, it appeared that the greatest had taken back control and was on his way to one more victory amongst many. But even when he was young, Ali could not dance for every round. And as the fight came to a close, Norton came back hard. At some point, Ali claims the second and Norton the 12th. Norton shattered Ali's jaw. Ali didn't show it and fought on, but Norton had done enough to seize victory, and had his name immortalized in boxing as one of the few men to ever beat Muhammad Ali. The two would fight 2 more times, but that's probably a story for another time. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in improving your own skills, you can check out Footwork Wins Fights and Power of the Pros, or pre-order Aggressive Defense, out soon. And make sure to check out our new fight comic, Mortal Weapons. Also, there are now enough of us to conquer a small state or country, so I expect to see everyone at the border of Wyoming tomorrow at noon. From the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.